In this video, I'm reviewing 5 board games that really stood out in 2020. These are games that take a genre and do something new and different with it. Games that aren't just repeating the same old themes or the same old mechanisms. They're not necessarily my favorites of the year, but I think they deserve a look because they could be right for you. I'm able to review the games that I think are relevant and give honest, critical reviews because the channel is funded by viewers, not sponsored by publishers. If you find these reviews helpful, please consider supporting Actualol on Patreon. There's something ambitious about Pan Am. It's got its sights set on mainstream crossover success, to be the next Ticket to Ride or Pandemic. Let's consult the checklist. 1, it's simple. 2, the board is a map of the world. Everyone loves a map of the world. It's where they live. 3, the theme is accessible. We all know what planes are. They're what we fly around to show birds that they're not special. And add to that a recognizable IP, that 2011 TV show starring Margot Robbie. Something to convince Nancy the non-gamer to buy it for Christmas, and then realize that board games are not just for geeks anymore. Which is great. I hope it sells 1 million copies and board games become more popular than our role-playing rivals, and I get a few more subscribers off the back of it. But is Pan Am right for you? Roll titles. You play as a fledgling airline, setting up plane routes to make money so that you can buy shares in Pan Am. Whoever owns the most shares wins. To claim a route, you'll need the landing rights in the cities you're flying between, by building an airport there or having the right card. You'll also need a plane. And it's all these things you'll be competing for to get the best routes. To get anything in Pan Am, you must bid for it. You bid for an airport, placing your pawn on 3 in the hope that you can get it on the cheap. A vain, stupid hope, because someone will definitely come along and outbid you, putting their pawn down to pay $5. You get bumped off and you can either bid again or cut your losses, bidding for, say, a card instead. It's simple and brilliant. There aren't enough airports, cards or planes to go around, so you have to spend your precious money to get them. Remember, that's precious money that you could spend on shares to win the game. And the game makes you fight for the same things. Each round, Pan Am will buy up routes, expanding along a path, giving the owner a handsome bonus, which means everyone wants those destination cards. To claim a route, you need to put your pawn on that track. So if you spend your first turn trying to get a cheap deal on an airport, you won't be the first to claim a route. And that's how you find out that Steve is taking the route you were planning for this whole round. Pan Am is gloriously competitive. You have to worry what other players are doing and get there first. There's a constant feeling of not being able to keep up because the Pan Am share price is going up every round and there is never a better time to buy than right now. The core of Pan Am is brilliant. It's interactive, it's strategic. It's more complicated than Ticket to Ride, but in return, the decisions are more juicy. You're more invested than in a game of Ticket to Ride, and that's why its heavy-handed luck hurts even more. One of your options is to take a card from the directives deck. These could give you free actions or discounts, or they could give you a free share, which feels like a cheat. Every other share is hard-won doing multiple actions to make enough money to afford it. This takes 1 pawn, 1 action, and some luck. And the events in the final round leave a similar taste. There are 4 possible endings to the game, and you don't know which you'll get, so you can't plan for it. One of them gives you a free share for every route you still own, which will swing the game in favor of the player with the most routes. The result feels too strong. It renders so much of what you spent the last 2 hours mulling over pointless. Ticket to Ride has luck, but it's part of the experience. You don't agonize over turns because you know your luck could change one way or another. Pan Am sets a completely different tone. The bidding tracks encourage you to really consider your actions and put together a strategy. It feels so much more unjust when you're working towards something so doggedly, the scores are so close, and then the final event card gifts the victory to someone else, and you're all left feeling bemused by what just happened. Pan Am does so many things well. I applaud its ambition. There is 90% of a brilliant game there, but I personally can't ignore the other 10% to fully enjoy it. In Santa Monica, you're building the city of Santa Monica with cards, but only the bit of it that anyone cares about, the seafront. It's a city building game, but one with real character. You're not building generic suburban town number 457 where every neighborhood looks the same. You're creating the very specific nonsense of Santa Monica. And it's so much more interesting to build a town with a muscle gym called Flecks of Sand than one with 5 housing estates that look like every other one in the game. The arrangement of your city is everything. No one wants to have their beach wedding surrounded by tourist traps, so it will score 2 points for every nature card it's next to. Every card will complicate your plans, giving you new ways to score, such as creating chains of shops. But what would a city be without the people? You have to attract tourists and locals to your beach community and usher them around, keeping everyone happy. When I add this car park, 3 tourists will arrive into town, but they're not happy. I've lured them here and now I have to build something for them to visit. This badminton net will satisfy their lust, scoring me 4 points, but only if I can get them there. And it can be tough to move people around. If you have people wandering your beach with nothing to do at the end of the game, you have failed as a town planner and you get the minus points you rightfully deserve. Adding people to a city building game is such a natural, welcome fit. It gives the game even more character. You can imagine these locals that moved to town when you built the apartment block, but end up resenting you because you couldn't deliver the volleyball paradise they crave. And it makes the gameplay much deeper. You can't just think about getting a nice chain of shops and restaurants along the street if you end up with a surfeit of surfers and nowhere to score them. There's plenty of puzzling to ponder. It's not the mellow, laid-back beach bum of a game you might assume. There are shared goals, a personal VIP that wants to visit certain places, and a currency of sand dollars which you can trade in to take stronger turns. At times, I had so many needs to consider, I found it hard to keep them all at the front of my mind when deciding what card to take. And ultimately, it's a personal puzzle. You are building your own Santa Monica, and there's no interaction beyond taking a card that someone else wants. I wish there was more of a reason to care what is going on with the other players. Santa Monica is such a refreshing twist on city building games. It has its own distinct feel, from its art to its thematic touches, even to its decisions, and very few new games can claim to have that. I've always wanted to find the perfect deduction game. There's something appealing about writing down clues and using my mind to work out a mystery. I think it comes from being hit over the head as a child by a candlestick in the billiard room. I've tried Mystery of the Abbey, Mystery Express, Tragedy Looper, Awkward Guests, Alchemists, Loot of Lima, Sherlock 13, 27th Passenger, Incognito, Witness, and Kryptos, and none were quite to my liking. After a while, I started to wonder whether I actually like deduction games. Modern astronomers believe that there is another planet in our solar system that we've yet to find, and their search for a Planet X is much like my search for the perfect deduction game, a noble quest which may never bear fruit. And by contrived coincidence, the game that might be my Planet X is called The Search for Planet X. The solar system is divided into 12 sectors, as we all know, and each sector will contain one space thing, such as a comet or an asteroid. It's up to you to work out which space thing is in which sector and use that information to deduce the whereabouts of Planet X. To gain information, you can run a survey, for example, searching for asteroids in sectors 1 to 4. The game uses a phone app to give you your info. It tells us there is one asteroid in sectors 1 to 4. And it's your info. The other players don't know what you've discovered. You know that asteroids always come in pairs, which means your one asteroid must be in Sector 1 or Sector 4 adjacent to its pair. Each of the astral objects has a specific behavior that will help you work out where things are. For more clues, you can ask the app for a rule. Each game, there will be a specific relationship between two types of astral object. It might say that the dwarf planet is opposite a comet. So if you already know where the comets are, you've narrowed down where the dwarf planet is. The game gives you plenty to be thinking about as you apply all the rules you know to the information you have and try to establish concrete proof. You will slowly rule out objects for certain sectors until you're left with what must be there. It's a brain burner, and you'll want to take some alone time with your notes to go over what you've learned in silence to make some conclusions. I found it hard to transition between chatting with my friends and being deep in thought trying to piece it all together. And is that fun? You have to answer that for yourself. For me, it feels rewarding to find connections and make deductive leaps, like I've achieved something. That something being maths homework. It's a satisfying experience, but not one that I play board games for. There's something interesting here about all deduction games. I won my games of Search for Planet X. I also spent more time staring at my notes than the other players, slowing the game down. In any other game, that would be called analysis paralysis, and it would be considered a bad thing. But I wasn't paralyzed. I was playing the game as it's intended. And yet, I still feel bad doing it. It hurt the experience. But I also don't feel there's an alternative. In any normal strategy game, none of my options will be 100% good or bad, so I can rush my decision and do fine. But with solving a deduction game, there is only right and wrong. If I rush myself, get confused and decide there's a comet where there isn't one, that throws off my entire game. In any other game, I would argue that rushing a decision and going with your gut is the best course of action. But where is the satisfaction in a deduction game if you don't satisfactorily deduct something? It takes you as long as it takes. And if it takes you as long as me, you might leave it on the shelf for everyone's benefit. Where Planet X shines is in its thematic touches. At regular intervals, you can submit scientific theories. If you know that an asteroid is in Sector 6, you can secretly brag about it. If you're right, at the end of the game, you'll get points. Not only for being right, but being the first to discover it. And remember how when you do a survey, it's a secret? Well, the other players do know what you surveyed for, and when it comes to submitting a theory, if you've only been surveying for comets, they're going to have a pretty good guess of what you're theorizing, and they could copy it later on. And that's the limit of the interaction in this game. Much like a real space nerd, you'll spend more time interacting with your scanning device than with your contemporaries. There is no sharing of information or asking questions like in some deduction games. But that comes with advantages. I've never enjoyed the disappointment of being passed a card in a deduction game only to be handed some evidence you've already seen. And by using an app, they've eliminated the possibility in those games of someone answering a question incorrectly and breaking the whole game. When you think you've found Planet X, you can tell the app where you think it is. And if you're wrong, you're still in the game. Unlike any game where once you've seen the culprit, you can no longer participate. The Search for Planet X is a rich deduction experience that really fits its theme. It has had more polish, more thought put into it than any deduction game I've played, but it's not for me. So it's time to cool off my search. The Search for Planet X is my deductive Planet X. It's just that I've traveled all this way to the outer solar system to find it and realized I don't actually like planets. I just remembered there is a deduction game I like. It's called Sleuth. Sometimes you spend your whole life searching for a Planet X when you had Pluto under your nose all along. Charles Darwin, this game is a clever idea. Thrive is an abstract game where your pieces evolve. They begin the game as lowly chess pawns, only able to move one space forward, shown on the piece itself with this peg. Every turn you will move one piece, then add 2 pegs to any of your pieces. Now they can move in new directions. If you land on the spot of your opponent's piece, you take it, and if you get them down to one piece, you win. It's tempting to put all your pegs in one basket, evolving your piece into a Sharknado that can do anything. But if your opponent traps your special piece in a corner that you can't get out of and takes it out of the game, you will lose all of your pegging progress and you'll be left with a bunch of pegless pawns who are going nowhere fast. Thrive has that classic strategic feel of chess and other abstract games. You can see the moves laid out before you. If I go there, she'll go there. But with a new layer, if I go there and put a peg there, she'll have to move to save her piece. But she can only move there, so I can put a peg there to get her there as well. There's a simple genius in putting your pegs in after you've moved. You can't reap the benefits now, you're forced to plan ahead. So often a peg is a threat to the other player. If you move forward, I'll take you. They respond to your threat not by moving, but by evolving their piece further. And just like in chess, you get locked in delightful stalemates. They could take your piece. They could have taken it 5 turns ago. But if they take it, you'll take theirs, and they're not ready to settle for that loss, hoping to find a more advantageous situation. Being able to put in 2 pegs means you can always keep one eye on attack and another on defense. On one hand, your options are easy to visualize because the pegs give you a very clear indication of where the pieces can move. It's as close as you'll ever get to them lighting up, like in an app. But as the pieces grow, so do the number of potential moves, meaning that it can take a while to consider your options and take your turn. And one downside of the pieces always evolving is that you never get used to the way they move. You have to reassess the situation anew each time. It's not a long game, there aren't many pieces to lose, but the turns can feel long. Compared to chess, it's probably a walk in the park, but I don't play chess for that reason. I definitely found myself taking longer with my turns than in Onitama, because there's more going on in Thrive. It has a purity over Onitama in its simplicity of form, but that means the game starts in the same way every time, like chess, or Thrive's rhymesake, Hive. It means the game has no luck in it, but could lend itself to repeated strategies or a feeling of sameness. Thrive feels like an exciting, fresh injection into the world of abstract games. One that does something significantly different, but remains as streamlined and pure as you'd want from an abstract game. If you're after a thinky abstract for 2 players, give this one a try. From the makers of Let's Make a Bus Route comes another command to remember our trip, and with it, another inspired theme. A while ago, you went on a trip to Singapore, remember? And you're reminiscing with your fellow players what it was like when you were all there. You'll be recalling the layout of the city, where landmarks, hotels, and restaurants were. And you'll be rewarded when your memories match up with the other players. The game is a tile-laying puzzle. Each tile represents a section of a building, such as a shop or a hotel. Each round you will pull some tiles from the bag, creating groups. You take it in turns to pick a group of tiles. Then you must arrange them on your personal map, in the shape that's defined by the card that was flipped this round. A shape you can't rotate. You're trying to create certain shapes with your tiles to complete buildings, and it's really hard because you never get the collection of tiles you want, and the shape you have to place them in is sadistically shaped, so that it's hard to interlock with previous shapes. And the feeling it gives me is of never being good enough. You seldom have a happy turn where everything comes together. It's more about trying to salvage what you can from a tricky situation. And that does provoke some analysis paralysis in me, in the vain hope that I can find a better place to put these tiles, only to eventually resign myself to the fact that none of them is perfect. Where it improves on most modern tile laying games is in its interaction. When you complete a memory by finishing a building, you'll take the matching tile and add it to the shared memory board, if there's space. The first person to claim a memory will score a memory match bonus, a point for every space they've filled, so there's a huge advantage to finishing buildings as soon as possible. If you finish a building and there isn't space for it on the shared board, it won't get placed, and you won't get the bonus. This means you really have to keep an eye on everyone's personal board to see where they're going to be finishing their buildings. But the clever twist of the shared memory is that you can score the memory match bonus if you remember the same building in the same place. And the game encourages you to align with these travel photo spots. You took a photo of a restaurant in this place in town, and if your memories don't match up with it, you'll lose points, which means every player is trying to put a restaurant in the same place. The restaurants and shops introduce some nice risk-taking. The bigger they get, the more points you'll get for them, but you can only score them if you've added a tile to them this turn. So the dream is to create a big 6-tile restaurant, but what if you never get another restaurant tile, or there's no space to fit it in? And the longer it takes to finish your restaurant, the more likely it will be that someone else puts a landmark in that spot on the shared board and you won't get the memory bonus. There's a lot to love about Remember Our Trip. I only wish it was a little less punishing and a little more satisfying to better fit its pleasant theme. Those are 5 games from 2020 that I thought deserved some attention. If you'd like to buy any of them, there are links in the description below. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. I'm Jon Purkis, thanks for watching.